Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, a podcast about soundtracks, music, and movies. Each episode features a guest and focuses on a specific soundtrack and the personal stories connected to it. Now here's your host, Ryan Pack.
I'm Ryan Pack, and this is Soundtrack Your Life. We'd like to thank you for listening wherever you are. We are celebrating the 2-year anniversary of the podcast, and we have a very special guest. He is an influential musician, songwriter, and soundtrack composer who has worked on so many great TV shows and films that we're going to cover shortly. His latest project is composing music for the Showtime show Yellow Jackets with Anna Waronker. Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, Craig Wedren.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Terrible twos. Gotta beware.
I am dealing with the terrible twos. Turning into a three-nager at home. One? Yeah.
A three-nager? Is that the word?
Yeah, we've got a three-nager, just turned 3.
That's hilarious.
And now she's got a baby sister, so if I look like I'm falling asleep, it's not because of you, it's because I'm sleep deprived.
I understand. I have a recently 14-year-old boy in the house.
Oh, that's a different kind of fun.
Yeah. It's actually great because we're starting to get into cool, weird movies.
Oh, nice.
The sort of P.T. Anderson, Tarantino, 70s auteurism. It's very exciting. It doesn't surprise me because my wife and I are both like inveterate movie nerds, and so it sort of makes sense that it was in the formula.
Sure. But
selfishly, it is the greatest treat. Not even selfishly, it's just pure joy to watch movies.
Yeah. And now you can start watching movies that his dad worked on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he's been watching those for a while because I have so many comedian friends that I came up with. My whole college crew was the State, that then went on to, they had a show on MTV in the 90s and then went on to make Wet Hot American Summer and Reno 911 and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's all stuff that he's been watching now for years. But it's that thing. It's only been very recently that I think he started to appreciate kind of he's a musician too, to sort of appreciate the music that I've made without just kind of poo-pooing it because I'm his dad. I mean, automatically there's going to be a degree of that, but every once in a while I'll feel chuffed because he'll just be like, I just heard this song that you did. It's really cool. I'm like, well, thanks for your seal of approval, son. It's so sad. It's like the highest compliment that we are so desperate and thirsty for is the approval of our children.
Sure. So speaking of being 14 years old, that's about the time where I discovered your music.
Really?
Yeah. So I went to go see the Foo Fighters on their first headlining tour.
Yeah. And
Shudder to Think went on before them.
Yeah, that's right. Where were you?
In San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And your music stuck with me. I didn't really know a lot about your band beforehand, and obviously in like the mid 90s I couldn't just go on streaming to hear your music before I went in. And I was really proud of myself because it was like the first time where I was having like musical opinions on my own. Like,
sure.
I didn't know anything about your band. I didn't have a Rolling Stone article to tell me to check your band out, or you know, you guys weren't on our radio station or anything like that, or my older siblings weren't telling me. And you know, I was like sitting through your set, and like somewhere in the middle, like everything kind of clicked, and I was like, oh, this is actually really good. And even though not everyone here is feeling it, like they're missing out because this is actually really good music.
Thank you so much. You can, and also you can be perfectly honest with me because I know sometimes Shudder to Think on first listen was, it was a polarizing experience for audiences and audience members. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of people who have said, I hated you the first time that I heard you. And, you know, now it's some of my favorite music, which is certainly the way that many of my favorite artists kind of crept in. sneaking through the back door of my skull and making me wonder whether it was ugly or beautiful, and then being a fan for the rest of my life. So to hear you say that it only took half a set is very, very flattering. Thank you.
Yeah, I think at first I thought you were all playing different songs at the same
Yeah,
time.
there is that aspect to some of our music.
But then like it all kind of came together, and then it kind of like blows your mind when like it all clicks.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just like, let's call it like an idiosyncratic jigsaw puzzle where the pieces, they fit together and they're custom made to fit together, but they don't seem like they should or necessarily are until you kind of get the right vantage point. And it's like, oh, it's a map.
Yeah. And if you've been like basically just listening to the radio your entire life,
Mm-hmm.
it takes a little bit of time to kind of understand that it doesn't, it's going to fit in a different way than you're expecting.
Yeah, that's right. But the truth is, we all come, but we at Shudder to Think all come from and came from radio too. We're just American boys who lapped up whatever was coming over the airwaves. So underneath the idiosyncrasy are, I always felt like there was a sort of classicism, not in terms of like classical music, but just in terms of like radio, classic rock, like sound sturdy melodies. It's just we like to smash it against the wall and turn it, like make balloon animals out of it.
Right. And when you guys came out with 50,000 BC, you kind of see some more like traditional sort of sounding songs.
Well, it was interesting because after Pony Express record, which was our first major label album and arguably our most difficult for first-time listeners, but also I think our most popular. But on a major label, they really need to sell a lot of records in order to make back their investment. And we knew that when we made the jump from Discord to Epic, but we really wanted to try and reach as wide an audience as possible with precisely what we were doing. That said, after Pony Express record didn't do as well as the label had wanted it to, there was sort of a sit down and okay, boys, here's your assignment. We need some hits. And we were sort of up for the challenge. Again, having come from radio, we always felt like we could write pretty direct, accessible, melodic stuff, but you do get into your own habits, whatever they are. And so to kind of undo our songwriting habits to try and do something more direct was really, really fun, and also didn't work commercially. which was when we decided to veer into composing music and writing songs for movies.
So your first project, at least that I'm aware of, was First Love, Last Rites.
Correct.
Which is celebrating its 25th anniversary.
That's crazy. I wonder when that is. Like soon? Now? This year?
It is this year. Yeah, it was this year.
That's really wild. I wonder if we have. I mean, we recorded so much stuff for that. Only, the soundtrack album's worth of which has seen the light of day. It could be fun to dig back in and release all the demos.
Selfishly, I would like to see a box set of 7 inches of those songs. But
I know. We wanted to do that at the time, but there were budgetary limitations.
So that soundtrack was the companion piece to the film, which was directed by Jesse Peretz, who you worked with when you were in Shudder. Well, I guess you were still in Shudder to Think at the time.
Correct.
You worked with Jesse, I believe, on some visuals for Pony Express record.
Yeah, Jesse. We became friendly with Jesse, actually. Shudder to Think, the original Discord lineup. We did a podcast yesterday about one of our Discord records called Funeral at the Movies, and we were going through a a list of tour dates, of European tour dates from right around then, because we recorded that album in London at the end of tour. And I noticed that one of the shows that we played in England was at a place called the Duchess of Leeds, which was this great pub and venue. And remembered that that was the first time that we ever met Jesse Peretz, because he was originally the bass player for the Lemonheads.
Mm-hmm.
And the show that we played with Lemonheads at Duchess of Leeds, it was Jesse's last show with the Lemonheads, and he lit his suitcase on fire after the set out in front of the venue and never looked back, and then moved on to directing videos for a lot of different bands, and then subsequently making movies. Jesse and I became roommates later, and then Nathan and he were roommates. So it was all very familial and natural, actually. I think Jesse and I were living together when he got the green light to make the movie First Love Last Rites, which is a movie based on a short story by Ian McEwan, I believe. And one of the characters in it has a collection of 45s, singles, in all different genres from all different eras. And so Jesse, who again didn't have the licensing budget to actually get real songs from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. So I remember specifically him walking into my bedroom, or us having a conversation. He was like, "Hey, would you guys want to do this? Create the record collection of one of the characters from this movie?" And it was perfect, because it was precisely the moment where we were really, really tired of the album touring promotional cycle. And it was wreaking havoc on our friendships, on our enthusiasm for just the creative process, which had always come so naturally for us. And so we owe a great debt of thanks to Jesse.
And I remember when the soundtrack was announced, you had all these different guest vocalists on it: Jeff Buckley, the late Jeff Buckley, Liz Phair, Billy Corgan, Robert Zander.
Yeah.
How did you get all of those people involved?
Well, we had some juice at the time. We were a very well-respected, not wildly commercially successful, but we were sort of a bands band. Like, we were very well-respected by like bands and artists. And we were on Epic Records. So we thought, well, why don't we meaning mostly me and the guitar player in Shudder, I think at the time, Nathan Larson, who's also a composer of note at this point. We decided that he and I would really hunker down and just like write all these songs, like a Johnny Cash kind of a song, a David Bowie kind of a song, a Zombies kind of a song. And we would sing them, and then through our record label and different contacts we had in the industry, beginning with great singers who were already friends of ours. So Jeff Buckley was a dear friend of ours, and Angela McCluskey was a dear friend of Jesse, and Matt Johnson from The was a dear friend of Angela's. And so it became this kind of puzzle of who you know. And and Billy was from Smashing Pumpkins, was a dear friend. They had graciously taken us out on tour and brought us on Lollapalooza in '94 when they were co-headlining, I think, with Beastie Boys. But so once we got Billy and Jeff, the rest of the dominoes sort of fell pretty easily, and it allowed our record label and other artist friends to kind of reach out to other people. John Doe is huge for us because X is sort of collectively, with Shudder to Think's, one of our favorite bands. And so it was really very thrilling. I remember having a conversation with Robin Zander. Somebody had organized it he said he was interested, but I needed to pitch it to him. And I remember standing in the living room of my then girlfriend's and my apartment on 10th between A and B in Alphabet City in New York. And I must have just gotten out of the shower or something, but I was like stark naked. And there was like a mirror on one side of the living room. And I'm sitting here talking to absolutely one of my all-time vocal heroes. I think Robin Zander has one of the most naturally gorgeous rock and roll voices in history. And I consider myself a pretty decent singer, but we used to try and cover Cheap Trick songs occasionally, and they're just, you realize what an extraordinary instrument this guy has when you like actually try and sing a Cheap Trick song, not in a drunken karaoke way, but like in a serious way.
Right.
And so I just remember being on the phone and catching myself in the mirror, stark naked, talking to Robin Zander, and just mouthing to myself, "Oh my God, what the fuck? Oh my God, what the fuck? I'm talking to Robin Zander. This is insane." And so the whole thing was kind of like that. I also remember there was this kind of Hawaiian ukulele lullaby that I'd written that I thought would be perfect for, there were only two voices I could hear for it. One was Bjork, and the other was Nina Persson from the Cardigans. And Bjork's manager or assistant, maybe personal manager at the time, was a Shudder to Think fan and sort of friendly acquaintance. And so she sort of granted me audience for 10 minutes, like while Bjork was hanging out at some bar or something, some fancy club. And so I put together this whole pitch, and it had like a CD in it and lyrics and a description of the project. And I remember her manager said to me, she was like, "Listen, you're gonna have," it was like going to see The Godfather. She's like, "You only have 10 minutes. You gotta like get in and out and really make it count. Okay, I have faith in you. I believe in you. Go do it. Go get Bjork." And I walked in there, and it was one of the couple times in my life where I absolutely froze up. I mean, I completely botched the entire thing. I started sweating, and I couldn't find piece two words together, and I was like trying to play it cool, but of course I think I came off as probably dead inside. and it turned out that it was a blessing in disguise, because we wound up getting Nina Persson from the Cardigans, and Nina and Nathan, the guitar player in Shudder to Think, fell in love and have been married ever since and have a family. And so I was happy to, in retrospect, I'm happy to have sacrificed my moment with Bjork for true love, for my friend's true love.
Well, maybe you can look at it as it was meant to be, right?
Meant to be. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I remember going to college and like just basically asking people like, "Hey, do you like music? Oh, you like music? Have you heard the First Love Last Right soundtrack?"
Oh, really? That's so cool.
Like, I just loved that soundtrack, and I think I got a lot of people into it because that Jeff Buckley track that kicks off that record is just such a powerhouse.
Yeah, totally beautiful. That's Nathan wrote that song. Nathan wrote "I Want Someone Badly," which Jeff sang, and "Speed of Love," which John Doe sang, and they're perfect. My one regret, particularly with my songs off that record, I was sort of lazy with the follow through on the production and arrangement for some of them. Like, we recorded these demos, and I was sort of like, "it's good enough." And Nathan, to his credit, was like, no, we need to. He's like, "I'm at least doing my songs right. We're going to get into a studio and actually record them properly." And I remember we recorded, I think most of the songs off that were demos, that we recorded at mine and Nathan's apartment. But "I Want Someone Badly," "Speed of Love," "Automatic Soup," the Robin Zander song, and I think maybe the Liz Phair song were ones that we recorded in proper studios. For some of them, like Robin Zander was living in Florida, and Liz, I don't know where Liz was at the time. She might have been on tour. But, we were sending things around, and it was before you could just send files easily. So we're sending tapes and CDs and sing along to this. And we booked you some studio time somewhere in Memphis, so it was a little bit catch as catch can, but we honestly felt like the concept for the project and the like those stars were not going to just align. So we needed to take advantage of it in any way that we could.
Yeah, I was going to ask, if you had the opportunity to like kind of direct these performances, but it sounds like you weren't even there some of the time.
So some of them we were able to direct. Like I worked with Jeff and John in the for I Want Someone Badly and Speed of Love, like on their vocals, because we did them in New York. But Robin Zanders, he did in Florida. I don't remember how Liz did it. Billy, I think we sent it to him. Alan and Mimi, is that her name, from Low?
Yeah.
I think we sent it to them too. They're in the Midwest somewhere. I don't remember. I would have to look at it and see. Angela, I think we did together for Day Diddy. And Nina was in Sweden. She just killed it. Like, she required no direction. She knew exactly what to do.
I mean, everyone sounds like they did a great job on the soundtrack.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree.
But I wasn't sure if it was just like they got a demo of you singing and they...
In a lot of cases, they got a demo of me, for the most part, me, in some cases, Nathan singing, and they redid it. And then anybody who either was in New York or who we could afford to bring to New York, who had the time, like John Doe, we worked with in person.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the High Art soundtrack is very different from First Love, Last Rites.
Yeah.
So it's more of a score.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And I remember there's like drum machines and, different things that...
Yeah, well, it was 98-ish. I think both of those movies were around 98. And so trip hop was happening. And the sort of first wave of the kind of experimental electronic stuff that like Warp Records was starting to do. And I was very, very taken with all that stuff. Both Nathan and I are big ambient music fans and creators. Like, even when we were teenagers in high school together, we would hang out at my house with my 4-track and make sort of experimental, ambient, occasionally beat driven, but that sort of didn't enter in until around High Art, which is such a narcotic kind of a movie. It was interesting. I remember we met with Lisa Cholodenko, who's still one of my best friends, the writer-director of High Art. And it was there was this really exciting moment happening in the New York independent film scene where people like Lisa or Jesse or Todd Haynes were all kind of making their first movies. And there was a lot of crossover between bands, or I should say the strict delineation between being a band person or a song person or a conservatory person or a classical person or a movie score person. It was all sort of melting down. And a lot of the people who were starting to make those movies had also come from punk and alternative. So there was no stigma. So we could go into a meeting. Well, obviously we knew Jesse, and so that was easy. That was friends. But we could go into a meeting with somebody like Lisa or Todd Haynes and actually be taken seriously. Even though we were coming more from the alternative experimental rock world. And I remember we met with Lisa and watched her movie, and it didn't have, I don't know if she still does, but she edited it with no music. So there's no what's called temp music, which usually people will cut picture to music, and they'll just grab whatever's in their whatever they think is appropriate, and then the composer winds up replacing the temp music with original score. But in this case, Lisa, it was there was no music in it, as I recall. And while I was watching it, the entire time I was like, I know exactly what to do with this movie. And I took it home, and we no more knew how to properly score a film then we knew how to, build a rocket to the moon. We just sort of used whatever we had on hand, and we would stick a VHS tape in the machine and watch the scenes and have our little keyboard and sampler or guitar or whatever and kind of play along to it and then just record it into an 8-track. And so I remember at the time we had these Kurzweil like sampling keyboards, which were great because you could record a sample into it and it would just kind of spread it out over the whole keyboard, and then you could play the samples. And I remember going home, I was so excited and inspired and blown away by high art. It was exactly what I wanted to do. And I was like, this is wine glasses and trip hop, like ambient wine glass score and trip hop and beats. And so I went home again to our apartment on 10th between A and B and just sampled a bunch of wine glasses and started writing this stuff. And it turned into just a really hand in glove fit with what was happening on screen. It was sort of transcendent and kind of narcotic and sensual and like a little spooky. And to this day, I still tend to use wine glasses in lieu of or in addition to strings.
Okay.
They just swim around a little bit more. There's I find them still to be like super evocative. Interestingly, though, not pre-existing wine glass libraries. I find that it's only when I sample my own that they get that texture, or that soul, or that grit to it. It's one of those mysterious things.
That's fascinating. Yeah. I think you're the first person that I've talked to that talked about their use of wine glasses and scores.
Yeah, I love wine glasses.
That's very cool. Yeah. So you were talking about Todd Haynes. We've covered Velvet Goldmine for the podcast already. It seems like there's a brand new appreciation for this movie that I've been seeing lately.
That makes me so happy. I want to go back and watch it. I feel like, my son's 14 and he's at least not entirely disinterested in the work that I do. So it might be a good time to watch. It might make him uncomfortable. There's so much overt sexuality and full frontality.
Yes, there's definitely that. So did Todd Haynes bring you into the project, or is this like a Randall Poster move? We've talked about Randall Poster quite a bit. It was
a Randall Poster thing. I don't remember how we first fell in with Randy. You know what? That's so funny. He actually, just to digress for a sec, Randall's he always has many irons on the fire, but he's about to release like an 18 LP bird song awareness and fundraiser for the Audubon Society and for birds that are in trouble, endangered. Mm-hmm. And he reached out to, a couple 120, I don't know how many artists, all to write original songs inspired by or based on birds, for which I contributed a song that I love so much. And the project is called For the Birds, and I think it comes out like maybe even next week. I think there was like a Times article about it yesterday. So Randy, who's like one of my favorite madmen, somehow came into our sphere at the time, and I don't quite remember how, but he has a golden ear and a brilliant warped lens through which he hears and sees things. And so I guess once they found out that they were not going to be allowed to license Bowie songs, he tapped Shudder to Think, knowing we were huge Bowie fans, to write a couple songs that were loosely influenced, inspired by, and otherwise, worshipful of David Bowie, which we were only too glad to do. I think ours are the only originals. I'm not sure. I think the rest are covers on the record, but there might be one or two other originals. like the Buffalo Tom song might be an original. I don't remember. But yeah, so that was a real thrill for us. And in retrospect, like I will say at the time, I thought this is a terrible idea. You these are what? Holy cows, holy grails, holy things that
Right.
You can only ruin, fuck up, or otherwise sort of besmirch. And how wrong I was, like, and how right Randy was. I've had that experience with him a couple times where he's like, "Shut up, kid. I know what I'm doing."
I'm so relieved that Randall Poster is someone that is like we've covered I think 5 movies where he's the music supervisor, and I'm glad that you're the first person who's actually worked with him. I'm glad that it's not like, oh, he's just this guy that does contracts, or
No,
like, oh, I've never actually met him.
no, he's an artist.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a very unique artist because I don't know that there's a job description quite for what his genius gift is, but he's real deal
Okay.
in my experience.
Because I'd have to do a lot of apologizing on my podcast.
He's great.
So he also brought you in for School of Rock.
Yeah, he brought me in for School of Rock too. Some years later, he called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm doing this movie. It's Mike White and Jack Black, and it's going to be amazing. It's a rock and roll movie, and we need not a ton of score, just a little bit of score, and it needs to kind of be metal alternative. And also, could you write a cheesy power ballad in the style of Creed for the Battle of the Band sequence?" And again, I was like, but of course. And again, I remember with that one too, I was like, no, I don't remember what I was responding to, but I was like, is this going to be any good? Like, I can't tell. I hadn't seen anything, or I didn't know much about Mike White or Jack Black at the time. And he was just like, dude, shut up. This is going to be great. Wait till you see it. And again, it was just like a magical gift from space. And then I was sort of the band wrangler for all of the PR that they did afterward, because they were playing on late night shows and doing appearances here and there. And so I was kind of the liaison between the parents of the band, the kids in the band, the production, and I would kind of run rehearsals, essentially kind of doing Jack's stuff and making sure the band was all good so that Jack could just kind of come in and like do the performance, or do like a rehearsal in the performance. And it was such a trip, and it was the best. And it really combined my experience being a band leader from Shudder to Think days, or band, sort of lead, like front person in a band, and having been a counselor at summer camp, which ties into Wet Hot American Summer,
Right.
And yeah, and just really enjoying and having been in cover bands that were basically just like that band, from age 12 to whenever Shudder to Think started at like age 17. So that was really dreamy and really, really fun.
So speaking of this kind of band liaison position, I was looking through your IMDb and you have a credit as a vocal coach on Anchorman.
Yeah, that's right. This is very funny. What are we here for? I think I don't remember what the years were on that, but I have a hunch. My wife and I were here in Los Angeles working with the School of Rock band, like I was rehearsing with them, being the band liaison. And our friend Paul Rudd was staying at the same hotel as us because he was in town. We knew Paul from Wet Hot.
Yep.
And a couple of years before, or that's how we became friends. And Paul was in Los Angeles shooting Anchorman, and we literally just ran into him in the hallway, and he was like, "Oh my God, great, Craig, okay, here's what's going on. We need to do an a cappella version of Afternoon Delight. Can you like figure out all the parts and record them and send them to the whole cast, and then come to the lot and just like work with everybody, just, real quick." And again, it was one of those great moments, those magic gifts, where I was like, "Oh, but of course I can do that." And then I got to like, I grew up with Afternoon Delight, the Starlight Band, I think is the band, from when it was probably popular when I was like 7 or 6 or something. But it's so different to take the watch apart for songs like that you know them, but I don't think I ever thought about that song more than just it sort of breezed by on the radio. So
Right.
To break it down and turn it into like a 4-part harmony barbershop quartet version of it was so fun and so absurd. And then I sent it to the cast, and then just showed up on set one day, and we just all got together in a trailer. They really didn't need me, in my opinion. They're all great singers, and like they pretty much knew what they were doing. I mean, I guess maybe the parts that I split out helped them, but the gift for me was just getting to hang out in a trailer with these masters of comedy and listen to them just have a personal concert for half an hour of them singing Starlight Band. Just for me. It was the best.
I was totally hoping that is exactly why they brought you in for vocal coach. I was like, I'm hoping it was Afternoon Delight.
Yeah, it was Afternoon Delight.
That's so awesome.
Uh-huh.
So you've been working with the state, the members of the state, ever since they had the sketch show. I didn't realize that you worked on the theme for the sketch show.
Yeah, that's right. So David Wayne, who directed Wet Hot American Summer and was part of the state, and it all connects. So David Wayne, a writer named Stuart Blumberg, who is now one of Lisa Cholodenko's writing partners, and I have been best friends since we were like 2 or 4 or something like that, from Cleveland. David and I went to NYU together, and first day of freshman orientation met Ken Marino, also a member of the state and a brilliant actor in his own right and director. We all became roommates, and they became part of this comedy group that, interestingly, do you know the children's book author Mo Willems?
I don't think so.
You will. He's like Dr. Seuss level popular sort of now. He wrote Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, and I can't think of his. Knuffle Bunny is like a huge book of his. Like in a couple of years, you'll start seeing him everywhere. It's like 5-ish.
Okay, I'm writing his name down.
Yeah, Mo Willems, he's great. He had this comedy group. He must have been a year older than us or so. And David and Ken, I think, joined the group. I don't remember quite what happened, but it morphed into this like black box sketch comedy troupe called the New Group, which then became the state, and they got a show on MTV right after we graduated. Meanwhile, I had, for the last 2 years of high school, been in Washington, D.C. I moved from Cleveland to Washington, D.C. in 11th grade, which is where Shudder to Think formed.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time David and I went to NYU, Shudder to Think was just putting out its like first couple records, like a single and the first record, which was particularly then in 1987, very impressive and like real official seeming. So I was in an experimental theater program doing actually a lot of sound installation stuff that would sort of relate to high art or even Yellow Jackets style wise. But most of my friends, like David and Ken and their comedy group, which would include Tom Lennon and Joe Latrulio and Mike Jan and Kerry Kenny, they became my crew, and they needed music. A lot of them were film students. They were making student films, and they were doing these live comedy shows. So even if it was just sound design, sometimes I think I was the sort of default de facto music guy that they knew, because I actually had records and I had a band and I would take off and go on tour sometimes. And so I kind of got my start scoring things loosely, unconsciously, very organically in college with the crew that would become the State and with whom I still work. I'm scoring a movie right now that Michael Jan just directed. I just talked to Ken this morning. We're always batting ideas around. Tom Lennon, I wound up meeting, falling in love with, and marrying his sister. So it's really still the same crew, and it's quite wonderful, I gotta say.
So I guess it wasn't like a surprise when you guys worked together for Wet Hot American Summer.
No, it wasn't a surprise, although it was interesting because Michael Showalter, who co-wrote and starred in Wet Hot and is now like producing and directing everything in theaters and on TV, he went to Brown, I think, for a year or two from NYU. And he had a Brown crew, which included the composer Theodore Shapiro, who came from a more traditional, like, conservatory. Like I was very untrained because I was coming from a rock and punk background, and he was coming more from a classical background. And so it turned out to be sort of a perfect a perfect yin yang of skill sets,
right?
Very, very complementary. And so Teddy, so I did the theme for the State and would score skits that were either more rock, pop, or experimental collage based, and Teddy tended to do the more like Porcupine Racetrack, the like traditional composition based stuff. So when Wet Hot happened, it was a natural fit, particularly because of what Wet Hot is, which is this riot of pop music, traditional score, pop score, parody songs that Teddy and I collaborate on it. And it turned into this really wonderful friendship and collaboration that still continues to this day. We still like to work on things together. In fact, Teddy scored the pilot for Yellow Jackets and couldn't do it when it went to series. And so I wound up being asked to do it, and then brought Anna on, who's a collaborator I'd been working with and adore. And so it turned into this really interesting, almost like bookend. If you take Wet Hot on the one side and Yellow Jackets, obviously very different beasts, on the other side, sort of an unintentional collaboration. Where Teddy did the pilot stuff, Anna and I did the rest of the series, and we were getting to mix and match our paint colors, which is always a joy to do.
And you worked with Anna before on Shrill, right?
Yeah, Anna and I worked on Shrill, and we worked on a TV show called The Republic of Sarah. Anna and I met maybe 5 or 6 years ago through a mutual friend, and we were both parents at the same school. Our kids were at the same school. And but we met at a party, and I knew of her band, That Dog, from the 90s, because they were sort of another kind of culty, slight weirdo alt pop band, but from Los Angeles. Right. And we were sort of a culty alt rock weirdo band from the East Coast. And so it was sort of love at first sight, you know. It very similar sensibilities, very parallel paths and stories. And so I knew, oftentimes when I meet somebody who's going to be a big part of my future, I know it immediately, and I have to restrain myself from telling that person what a big part of the future we're going to be to each other, because it can creep them out. But right. But I'm frequently right. And I remember at that party, I was like, oh, okay, Anna and I are going to do stuff together. This is going to be great. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to freak her out. And then gradually that transpired, and we started looking for shows to do together. And it's definitely like another one of those just sort of familial gifts of a collaboration. It's really great. Very complimentary, finish each other's musical sentences, be able to lovingly, constructively, but clearly and firmly criticize each other's ideas, which is vital. All we need to do now is start a band together. We sort of treat our TV and movie collaborations as band projects. We're like, oh, this is our horror record, or like, this is our alt pop comedy record.
Yeah, and I think it's really great that you guys have gotten a lot of recognition for what you've done on Yellow Jackets.
Thank you.
I mean, 20 years ago, I think you should have been getting a lot more recognition, but I'm glad to be seeing it now.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about your collaboration with Jefferson Friedman, not exactly soundtrack related, but I think you guys are working together now on New Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, we've done a lot of soundtracks together. New Amsterdam, TV show called A to Z. Did he work on Don't Trust the Bee and Apartment 23? I'm not sure. But yeah, we've worked on a bunch of stuff together, and a couple movies, and then a few recording projects as well.
Yeah, I saw you at the Walt Disney Concert Hall perform a couple of songs from your project with him.
Yeah, On in Love.
And
that was a wild one.
Yeah, it was fun. I remember during intermission, I don't think you had gone on yet, and my wife saw Thomas walk by.
Uh-huh.
And then a few minutes later, Ken Reno walked by.
Yeah. He brought the whole crew.
And my wife was like, "Why? We usually don't see so many like famous people at these shows." And I don't know, like I'm a fan of everyone, but like I don't know anyone. Mm-hmm. But just with 100% confidence, go, they're like us. We're here to see Craig.
That's really sweet. That makes me feel very happy.
I mean, they could have been there to see other people. Like, the whole program was fun.
They definitely were not there to see other people.
But I was like, yeah, they're like us. They're just like us. Right. I know them.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jefferson is a brilliant composer. He's doing a lot of stuff on his own now. He's doing it's an animated DC series. Oh, come on. Batman, female nemesis, Joker's girlfriend.
Oh, Harley Quinn.
Yeah. He's doing the Harley Quinn series, which is really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, very cool.
But Jefferson, it's interesting. He was, also more of coming from a more classical conservatory angle. He and Stuart Hill, the bass player in Shudder to Think, were roommates at a certain point in the 90s in New York City. And we needed a touring keyboard player for, I think, the soundtrack stuff. I think when we did a First Love, Last Rites tour. And so Jefferson became our keyboard player for a while. And I remember being on a flight either to or from San Francisco for one of our shows. And this was sort of when Shudder to Think was already, I think, knowing that we were going to be breaking up or splintering somehow. And I remember being on the flight, and I had a lot of sort of experimental leaning toward modern classical stuff I was doing of my own, and he had his stuff that he was composing, and we were doing show and tell on this airplane. And I remember we made a pact on that flight to collaborate on something together, which then came to fruition with 15 years later or whatever it was with On in Love, which is a record that I love so much and I'm so proud of, and I just don't know if anybody knows about it. Someday.
I mean, it seems like there's a trend with you where you'll work on something and then people will appreciate it like 10 to 15 years later.
I hope so. I feel pretty passionately about the things that I work on. I put a lot of like loving intention and integrity into it. And it's definitely easy at times to feel like I'm insane, because I feel like my friends and I have made these special things that, are like farts in the wind, like absolutely, or pisses in the ocean where nobody knows that they even exist. So it's really, really encouraging to hear you say that, because, sometimes we all sit there scratching our heads, and particularly now, I mean, it's virtually impossible to know how to break through the sheer volume of content noise, which is why TV and movies are wonderful, because like I don't have to worry about it. It's like it's up to a studio, and is why I'm so thrilled about the recognition that Yellow Jackets is getting, because it's music and collaborations that I'm extremely proud of and would love to be making and sharing with people under any circumstances, whether it was a Craig Wedren, Anna Warrenker record album project, or just like live noise improvisation, like to have the stars align and have it all come together where it's a great job, it's great people, it's super creative, the show's awesome, we love it. When we were making it, we were like, hopefully the world will love this as much as we do. But both Anna and I have been had so many projects and occasions where we felt certain that everybody's going to love it. And Wet Hot is a perfect example. Mm-hmm. We made Wet Hot and we were positive that it was like the greatest thing since sliced bread and was going to like change the face of comedy. And it made $300 opening weekend, and it was a low budget movie, like $1 million maybe. And it took over a decade to make its budget back. Now everybody considers it sort of like whatever, canon or something. But it really was a dud for a long time. Yeah. So I think, there's a little bit of that like whipped horse twitchiness that we all have, which is like, let's not count our chickens before they're hatched or invest too much into, how successful or not successful or how something is received. So when it does click, like with Yellow Jackets, it's just such a joy. It's really cool.
How gratifying was it to be able to come back to Wet Hot American Summer for those Netflix sequels?
Oh my God, it was the best. Particularly that first season is like, I think if anything, better than the movie. It's certainly as good for me. I just think it's like everybody firing on all cylinders with no time to think twice. Which in that case it worked, and it's
yeah. I agree. It's just as good as the movie, if not better. My favorite scene in that season is when Chris Pine, writes Higher and Higher, and then midway through, like everyone all just immediately knows all the words to the song.
Yeah, everybody knows the words. They're just standing down there because, of course, it's always been in us.
I remember showing my wife the movie for the first time, and I think it was like a Shudder to the Think song where at first it was like, what is this?
Yeah.
But by the end of it, I was like, oh, this is actually really, really funny.
Yeah. And it stands up. It bears multiple viewings. There's so many little details especially in the series, because it's so much faster. Because like when we made Wet Hot, it was 2000. I don't remember when it was shot, 99, 2000. And and editing styles were just slower then. So 15 years later, for streaming services, the sheer density and volume and velocity of jokes. I mean, I could watch that first season, just loop it, just keep looping it and see different things every time, appreciate different things every time.
Was it kind of a win for you that they finally released the soundtrack?
Yeah, I was very happy. Both Teddy and I were very happy about that. It's one of those things where we were so juiced about it at the time, so that by the time the soundtrack came out, it was like, I don't know, I think we were sort of like, oh, that's great. Now, okay, we'll take it. I mean, we love it. The packaging is beautiful, and there was a lot of care and attention that was put into it from a fan's perspective by the time it came out that probably would not have been the case had we released it at the same time as the movie.
Right.
So that was a good thing. It's like very much like a fan's, it's a collectible.
Yeah, my friend David has a vinyl soundtrack YouTube channel, and I told him that I was going to interview you, and he's like, I've got Wet Hot American Summer on vinyl.
That's awesome.
I was like, I'm going to let Craig know.
That's great. Yeah, it's good. It's a good vinyl package. It's nice.
So as an Asian American, the show Fresh Off the Boat is a big deal to me, and you did the music for that show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you also do the theme with Danny Brown, or is that something kind of separate?
No. Actually, I wrote a different theme, which was more akin to the kind of 90s hip-hop comedy score that we were doing. That sort of like beats and strings, 808s and pizzicato. But once we heard that Danny Brown thing, it was just such a slam dunk. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, if you had told me that you worked with Danny Brown on that theme song, I think my brain would have just like exploded. It's just been too much for me.
I know, me too.
It's like such a very specific thing. It's like, okay, you got this Asian American family, and Craig Wedren's doing the music, and Danny Brown's doing the theme song. I was like, I feel like this is very catered to like just me and
right.
Maybe it's like 500 people.
A demographic of one.
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, that's a sweet show. I miss it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that it got as many seasons as it did.
Yeah, me too.
And I never got tired of seeing your name in the credits.
Thank you.
Like, is it weird for you to see like Johnny Greenwood doing scores now, or did you think that was a pretty logical step for him?
I think Johnny Greenwood's scores are wonderful. It strikes me that a lot of his scores, a lot of them feel to me like music that he writes that then gets used over picture, rather than like scoring dramatic beats, which I think is often leads to really magnificent synergetic accidents that you wouldn't get if you were, more pointillistically, traditionally scoring a scene. Sometimes, and then conversely, sometimes I wish that specific beats and moments in the movies he scores were more, that there was more attention paid to like actually scoring relationships, beats, moments, details. Like sometimes I feel like I need a little more direction than I'm getting, and sometimes I love that it's so free feeling. But I mean, he's wonderful. I mean, he's obviously like extraordinarily musical. Do I get pissy and like frustrated? That he and other band types, but actually probably mostly Johnny Greenwood lately, coming from similar backgrounds, are having such high profile careers where, back to what we were talking about, you and I, few minutes ago, that it seems to take so long for some of the stuff that I work on to land or connect with people. Is that frustrating to me? And does that make me grumpy and pissy like a little baby? Yes. Does it always make me grumpy and pissy? No. Mostly I'm just psyched for him. I think it's awesome. It's like, which is to say, like, it's not against him. Right. It's like, it's more like, dang, come on, people. Prick up your ears. So, sometimes I get frustrated by comparison, but generally I feel so happy with my life and the projects I get to work on and the music I get to make and the people I get to do it with. I mean, like, I really have nothing to complain about, and I love that his popularity makes it easier. Again, this idea of kind of melting the boundaries and distinctions the between traditional sort of like strictly codified realms of work, like you are either in a band or you are a composer. Obviously, right. It's all one thing. It's just music.
Well, I hope you know that the mission statement of my podcast is to help you. Like,
thank you.
The mission statement of my podcast is, why doesn't everyone know who Craig Wedren is?
Thank you. I mean, truly, it's not something at this point that I ponder too nastily or even too often. But we're all competitive little bitches.
Thank you, Craig, for coming on the podcast.
This is my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And a happy anniversary. Many, 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 many more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if people want to check out your music, what is the best way for them to
do that?
Well,
I mean, unfortunately, I guess I would have to say Spotify. It's a bit of a mess, my Spotify identity up there. It just gives it's so strange what soundtracks do and don't get released. So it gives a slightly skewed impression, I think, of the music that I make. But go to Craig Wedren at Spotify, and I'm on all the socials, just under my name, Craig Wedren. And obviously, Shudder to Think.
Well, thank you again. Like I said, this is probably like a bucket list sort of interview for me. So much of your music has been part of my life for 25 plus years now.
Thank you. That touches me. I appreciate it.
And hopefully I can see you again live.
Yeah, I hope so. I actually have a new band called Flesh Car. And so far it's an improvisational band with another composer named Jarek Bischoff and a drummer named Jacob Richards, who actually plays all the drums on New Amsterdam, which is a very drum-heavy soundtrack. We're going to be playing our first shows in the LA area in July, and so I'll be super curious to see what becomes of that. And other than that, I don't have any song concert plans. I do a lot of live meditation music, sort of choral, improvised. Like a lot of times I'll pair up with yoga teacher friends of mine or meditation teacher friends of mine, and we'll rent out a studio or go to somebody's beautiful house, and everybody will lie down on the ground and just kind of get lost for an hour or so. I might do a tour of that stuff. Those are called Sabbath sessions. and those are also up on my Spotify account. So, you know, just to confuse everybody more, just throw more different styles and projects into the mix.
Well, very cool. I'm excited to hear about Fleshcar, and I'm excited to hear about everything that you're working on in the future.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.